Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We're really excited. Please help us welcome Willie Real. Just to introduce him really quick, he is a character designer and illustrator from San Francisco. He works with esteemed folks like Pixar, Netflix, DreamWorks, Blue Sky, Paramount, Airbnb, Google, and Oculus. And his work has contributed to several honors, including 3 Emmys and an Oscar nomination. And without further ado, please welcome Willie. Woo!
Oh, I see a bunch of little claps. That's cool. I'm still getting used to this Zoom. Uh, it's actually kind of nice because it's not as nerve-wracking as being up on stage in front of 100 people. So, but thanks for having me. Yeah, as you were going through that list, I was like, oh, that's a lot of places. um, but yeah, hopefully you guys get something out of this. It's a little presentation that I put together for past talks, either at like the Animation Collaborative. I've taught a class out in Hartford, Connecticut. I've been all over the world. I've been to Stockholm where I've done presentations and done classes. So yeah, this is a little bit about me. So yeah, my name is Willie. And yeah, I am a character designer in animation. These are some troll designs I did for Trolls World Tour. And on my free time, I also illustrate, personal stories like this one on the left called Leo Leon, or things that inspire me, like my old apartment in San Francisco. So like many of you, I've been drawing since I was a little kid, everything from the, the toys I had to awkward engagement photo shoots on the right. This is probably the earliest drawing um, that I have that my parents had. So I just wanted to include something there. My folks immigrated to San Francisco, where I'm from, in the 60s, and Spanish and English was spoken at home. And like the record player spun trio music, Santana, Elvis, and of course the Beastie Boys. So it's just kind of like an array of sound and an eclectic environment that we grew up in. We also visited lots of family in Mexico a lot of summers, where we have fond memories of like the adventures and the trouble my sisters and I would get into. So that's a little bit about like my background. Cartoons were definitely on TV. Yeah, Saturday morning cartoons were another huge influence on my adolescent brain, for better or for worse. In high school, the more like mature subject matters and the fantastical worlds that Miyazaki was creating really resonated with me. And then, of course, Pixar was doing their thing and starting to create something very special, which was all kind of like my biggest influences when I was younger. When I got to high school, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had an English teacher by the name of Miss Wolf, that was kind of my beacon, supported and kind of inspired us to actually pursue what we were good at and what we were passionate about. And there was a really cool program after school called the Student Illustrators, where we illustrated posters and T-shirts and like book reports, and even illustrated like history lessons for teachers. And it was cool because it was kind of like a nice structured environment where I actually started believing that I could do this for a living, having clients and like doing the drawings and getting the notes and all of that. So that was a pretty special kind of stepping stone when I was in high school. But I wanted to go into animation because for me, a whole nother thing for me, it was kind of like magic right in front of my eyes, these drawings, several drawings coming to life and creating all this character. So I still didn't know what colleges were out there, but I knew I wanted to get into like traditional animation. So I went to the Santa Rosa Junior College, which is it's a JC near where my parents are from in the North Bay. And I just stayed in school, and like I found out about Cal Arts, which was like a traditional animation school at that time, and couldn't get in. I applied to CalArts for 3 years. Oh, you can hit next, Melinda. Thank you. So I found out about CalArts in high school, and I realized that's what I really wanted to do and get in and try. No luck getting in. So I went to a Santa Rosa Junior College, the Santa Rosa Junior College, where I got my GE and like took a lot of like, um, you know, like introduction to the arts classes, a lot of printmaking and painting and like figure drawing. Um, and year after year, I was trying to like improve my portfolio with CalArts or for CalArts and or like my animation reel. And I didn't really have like a workspace yet, so I was just doing drawings at home and like shooting them on like an old VHS, and it wasn't good enough. So after the third year, I got a letter in the mail from CalArts, and it was just kind of like to congratulate me on like making the last cut, but not accepting me. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's not gonna work out. Which was also nice because it was close to home and I could stay at home. And I majored um, at the Academy of Art in traditional animation at first, and then while I was there, I went to this Pixar art show at a museum in downtown. If you want to hit the next slide. Yeah, it was one of the, I think it was one of the first Art of Pixar shows that just changed everything for me. I learned what visual development was because I didn't know what that was. And I also found out about character design through this show. And when I saw these pieces on the slide, that's then and there is like what I knew, what I wanted to do. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. So in college, I adjusted and kind of pivoted and like, more visual development classes because I was doing animation, but it was just animating characters that already kind of existed. Um, so yeah, I adjusted in college, and then I majored in illustration and animation because Viz Dev wasn't a thing yet, and there was a cool opportunity for like the senior show. I don't know if you guys are alum or seniors or what, but we had a senior show at the academy where the school kind of flies in all the recruiters and like directors and all these people from all over the country. And that's where I met a director from Blue Sky who really liked my work. And he told me to send in the portfolio, and they really liked it. And it was funny because I graduated from college. And after I graduated, I went with a good friend of mine, and we like went all over Europe and like planned this like after graduation trip for like a month and a half to like visit Paris and London and like Spain and all this stuff. And I hadn't heard back from recruiters at that point, so I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go on my trip and try to enjoy myself after like all this school. And like the second day of the trip, Blue Sky calls and asks if I want to do a test. And I was completely honest with the director, and I was like, I would love to, but I just got to Europe. I don't know what to do. Like, can I take it? Can I take the test when I get back? Like, should I come back now? He's like, no, it's fine. You can, where are you going? And he like gave me, recommendations, and like, he was very supportive. But then I hung up, and like, I kind of wanted to just throw up because I felt like that was my opportunity. So I called my mom, and my mom's like, don't worry about it. Like, work is work. There'll be plenty of work for you in your life. Enjoy yourself. So that was like, monumental advice on my mom's part. So it took a week to kind of finally like get used to the idea of like, I might not ever have the opportunity again, but it worked out. Yeah, it was good advice. Um, so I got back and I called them and it worked out. I did a test for Horton Hears a Who, which was my first movie there, and uh, kind of like jumped into the fire. You know, a ton of work and in school, and you know, just the timing gods kind of were on my side. Um, but kind of jumped into the fire on Horton Hears a Who, designing most of Whoville and like the mayor's house, and um, you know, that was kind of um, a big kind of learning curve for me, because it was just, you know, I was used to like doing the work in school, but this was like on another level because everyone was so good there. Um, and then after Horton, I worked on Ice Age 3 and a bunch of other projects, and Rio was another one that I worked from like start to finish, designing a lot of the environments and sets. If you want to hit next. But Blue Sky for me was kind of like my master's degree. I learned a lot from the artists there, and not only like in their practices and like techniques, but and you know, just like an overall good person. And this picture is me on the left with just this like really talented group. I don't know if you guys are familiar with some of these guys, but there's like Pete Wynn and Vince and Mike Knapp and Dice Tsutsumi and Peter DeSev and Bob McKenzie's in there, and Greg Couch, all these amazing artists that were the nicest people. And like this, I think, was taken at the Society of Illustrators in New York, which is a really cool spot. But after about 5 years at Blue Sky and like almost 6 years in New York, I started missing home, and I had the opportunity to come back to California and work with Google on their homepage for about a year and a half. You want to hit next?
Could I jump in with a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Like for your you know, like this first industry experience, like could you elaborate a little bit more like on if you ever had, you know, if you ever faced self-doubt or imposter syndrome, or like what the biggest challenges and mistakes and lessons learned were for you?
Yeah, for sure. It's I definitely experienced imposter syndrome there. I even still experience it to this day sometimes, but I feel like I'm better equipped to work through it nowadays. And I think one of the things I learned about Blue Sky was to just kind of observe and like turn into a sponge and just kind of like absorb and learn and keep growing. You know, I thought after I graduated, I like knew it all, right? And it's incredibly humbling to like get to a studio like that and realize like, oh man, these guys are amazing. I don't even know why I got hired. But you know, even to this day, I still try and position myself to like keep learning and growing, because you know, what I do and like what we do as artists is so subjective, and it's always like moving and changing, and you know, you can't really say better or worse. You know, it's just more of like growing and adapting, I guess. But yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, after about 6 years, I came back home. Google reached out to a lot of the Sky, but they were looking at like work with animation people just to start bringing like animation to the homepage, which I thought was amazing. It kind of, I mean, there is like animated doodles, and there was a department at Google called Google Spotlight Stories that was doing VR shorts like later on. But when I was there, we got the chance to kind of, it was more of like an illustration job more than anything, which I loved. It was a change of pace for me. And it was a lot of work at the time because there was only 5 of us and we were doing doodles for all over the planet. Some of these are like my favorite. Heavy research was included in this work because we had to get it right. Depending, like, I can't remember the name of the one on the top left, but it was the scientists that had discovered, like, I think it's DNA. I don't even remember. Prunet, maybe that's it. Gregor Mendel, that's who it is. The Mendel doodle. Thank you. Yeah, Gregor Mendel. You know, that was kind of the work. Like, we'd sit down with our bosses and they'd pick people to celebrate every quarter, and like it was fun to just kind of, you know, crank on these doodles. And you know, some of my favorite ones were just like the simple illustrated ones. A lot of them were also interactive, like the Thanksgiving doodle. And it was cool. It was a whole new thing for me to like work with engineers and you know, and put something on Google's homepage that's like seen by billions of people. So, but after about a year and a half, I started kind of missing a little bit of like the biz dev world. So I left Google, and I worked at a small video game studio with some old friends from high school, which was a lot of fun. I don't think any of they kind of knew like my sensibilities and strengths, and they kind of let me do whatever I wanted, which is great. But I don't know if it definitely influenced a little bit of the look of the game, but again, it was just, for me, it was jumping back into the character design and like a little bit more of like the world building that I'm like really into. From there, like freelance started picking up for me, which you know, being in the Bay Area was nice because I feel like I was in the right place at the right time. If you click next, yeah. You know, I worked on a slew of short films. This was a short film called Coin Operated for a filmmaker who was like passionate about making this little short. This was his like passion project, and it was a nice small team where, you know, I got to, this was kind of like when I finally felt like I landed back into like what I really enjoyed was character design. From there, I kind of worked on a lot of the VR shorts, which kind of posed unique challenges and unique kind of problem solving in themselves. Small teams and like figure that stuff out, and you know, put on the headset and see what those challenges were. And this is from the Oscar nominated VR short film called Pearl. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see it. If you go to the next, and if like I was saying earlier, like on the next slide.
If you don't mind if I ask a question regarding
sure.
designs. So were there any new things to consider in your designs when working on VR, if you haven't, oh, I'm sorry. And was the production experience any different from the others you've worked on?
Yeah, as far as like the design, it's not really different. But I think the end product was the challenge, because you know, in like animation, we're so used to working within a frame and, you know, designing our backgrounds and like designing the backgrounds for the characters to do their performance. Like all of that is a nice kind of foundation and anchor to hold on to. And in VR, like when you put on the headset, that frame goes away. You can look anywhere. So there was, you know, creative problem solving that we had to do. I think the amount of work, this was a short film, and the amount of work for this was on par with like a feature film with the environments, just because this was a road short, like a traveling story. And, you know, we had to design, again, not for that frame, but for like the whole world, like the trees, the mountains, the Pacific Northwest, the Midwest, South, you know, all of that. So I think it was different in the sense of like the volume of work, but the design itself, it wasn't too different. But the cool thing about this director, he took that challenge of like the frame. The story takes place in the car, which is that little white kind of, I think it's a, I can't remember what car it was. It was his first car in high school. Pearl is the name of the car, the paint color. And he figured out a solution to kind of use that car frame itself as like the frame. So when you're in the car and you're looking out, you know, the frame of the car is kind of, the windows are like your frame to the world and to the story, which was genius in my opinion. Because, you know, at the time, like VR, I don't know, like people just were very excited about it. And people just started saying stuff like, you know, you can't cut in VR, you can't cut shots in VR. And I never knew why, but when I saw it, I understood like, oh, okay, it does feel jolting to cut from scene to scene in VR. And that car frame was like our one constant that kind of helped us from shot to shot, which was nice. So I do think there are more specific stories that you can, you know, that work better in VR, and other stories that maybe aren't, you know, for that. But yeah, it was a great experience, and it was cool. I'm excited to see what, I feel like VR has died down a little bit, but I'm curious to see where they go with it in a sense of like, I think it'll do well in games, obviously, but yeah, we'll see. The next project was also a VR project. And this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier. I was in the right time at the right place because I'm from San Francisco, and I worked on all these projects while I was in San Francisco. And, you know, the lack of animation opportunities in the Bay is pretty much, it's, I mean, other than nowadays, there's like a lot of small studios, you know, that are like Pixar expats. But at that time, it was just Pixar, and DreamWorks had a studio in Redwood City, but that studio closed and everyone moved down to LA. But it was good timing because like the tech world was like hyped up about the Bay Area with like Google and Oculus. And that's why I say like I was in the right place at the right time. Was, you know, a lot of people called me because I was in the Bay. I could go into the studio. We can like have that studio experience. And yeah, it was fun. This one was for the Emmy-winning short film called Henry. And it was for Oculus. And it was about a little hedgehog that wanted to throw a birthday party, but no one came because, you know, he's thorny and spiky, and no one can really, no one likes hanging out with this dude. But yeah, that I didn't include the final design, but these were like just explorations. And like the one on the left is kind of like a day in the life, you know, of yeah, exactly, Hedgehog's dilemma of like things just getting stuck. After that, I went back to Google as a freelancer. They started all the tech companies started like developing their avatars and like the VR and the AR kinds of things, kinds of projects they were developing. And that was fun because for me, it was like a different sensibility. It was more about simplifying the design and a little bit more of like a elegance maybe to these little designs, where we wanted them to be clear because they're so, you're going to be looking at these avatars on your phone or like in a headset. And it was fun. And honestly, like, it was a little frustrating because like we developed so many cool ideas and projects, but there's a lot of moving parts, and most of them didn't see the light of day. But that's up to the the Google gods on like what gets put out and what doesn't. But these were like fun explorations of like how to come up with this avatar system. And like we looked at the Nintendo Mii's, were like a big inspiration because they're so successful. And then also some familiar faces. Can we like break down to these like subtle shapes and still make these avatars familiar to yourself or to others? So it was fun. It was cool.
Quick question, going back to the last project you worked on. I'm curious to know like what like Emmy Awards mean to you, and like did you ever picture yourself working on projects that have won Emmys, Emmy winning productions?
Yeah. Thank you. No, I don't picture myself. I didn't picture myself winning Emmys or any of that stuff, but it's truly an honor. Like, it's amazing that, that short got so much love and attention from both, like, the tech side and like the animation community. But I always, I never like try to plan for an award. It's just kind of, it's just kind of like focusing on my process and having as much fun with the work, and the drawings themselves is like where my reward is. Many concepts and ideas that don't get used, which, when I was younger, that kind of sucked. But I understood, it was kind of like that learning that you do, and like you grow to understand that, like, oh, okay, like this is what I get to have at the end of the day, is like these drawings and these ideas and like the actual work is where I have the most fun. So if an Emmy comes from it, that's great, but I definitely don't plan for it.
It's a great way to think about it. Thank you.
Yeah. But after the Google thing, I was on and off at Google for like a year, and then freelance, like feature animation freelance started knocking, which was great. And I started working back in that comfortable space, I guess, or space that I love more than anything. And yeah, it was fun. This slide is for development project. Again, a little bit of that, like, stuff that you develop for a while and then it just goes nowhere. This was for a project at Paramount, based on like the Mr. Men series. I don't know if they're still developing it, but again, it's like applying myself and having fun with the work that's in front of me, and then like whatever that studio decides or whatever those animation gods decide to do with it, it's up to them. Then I got a chance to work at Tonko House with friends on Go Go Corey Carson. which was a lot of fun. It's for me, it's like characters and environments. I did a lot of environments on Go Corey Carson, and for me, characters and environments are pretty much the same thing. Um, so I thoroughly enjoy environments just as much as characters. And this was for, I don't know if it's out yet. I think it might be season 3, but this was like a drive-in. Their movie theater is a drive-in theater, obviously, because they're cars. Um, and the next slide is just kind of breakouts and call outs of like the set design, Corey's basement that he's trying to like make his own room, and just breakouts of the walls to give to the modeling department. You know, another project came up, which was close to home. It's a project called La Llorona, which we did a few, it was kind of a quick, really, I did this in like a day where it was just kind of a quick idea to kind of help establish like a style or a tone of like, you know, a lighter, a lighter take on a story that's like pretty dark. But again, just like more development work, which, you know, doesn't see the light of day. This next one was kind of like a really special moment for me because, you know, being from the Bay and like Pixar being in my backyard, I never got the chance to work there until this project. They wanted to bring me in because I feel like they started to understand that maybe, you know, they were trying to like bring in different people and different chance to work on, I always want to say Trio, that was the working title, Trio, or Onward, as you guys know. And it was fun. It was intimidating as heck because everyone is amazing there, and like the whole kind of like fanboy aspect I had to like put away. But it was cool to kind of work on these early, I was tasked with like doing a pass at all of the species lineup, like everything from the gnomes and the cyclops and elves and sprites and minotaurs and a bunch of that stuff. And yeah, we also explored like what modern day elves might look like, you know, because we did the past fantasy world where they're all kind of like Lord of the Rings, like very epic and very fit. And like, you know, what does a modern day elf look like that maybe let themselves go, or is like a charming old grandmother, or, you know, so we got to explore that. And then the next one, uh, this was, so originally the story had a phoenix in it, which was a very cool, like dark crystal-esque character, where the main character would have to like solve this riddle and puzzle similar to like The Hobbit, where, you know, the phoenix was like a big part of like the original story, but, you know, stories change, and like it ended up being like this I can't remember what it was called, but that kind of rock monster thing that they fight at the end. I got a chance to work on Trolls World Tour, and that from that first slide you guys saw. These are like concepts for King Quincy, who was heavily based on George Clinton and like Funkadelic. The next slide is King Quincy and Queen Z, like the final. I don't know if these are the final character designs, but it's nice to kind of like work in color, or like in like tones, or like sketchy, you know, it's just whatever kind of like serves, you know, the purpose. Yeah.
And kind of touching on your experience with various animation studios such as like Pixar and DreamWorks, what were the major differences between each place that you've worked in? Was it hard to adapt to each studio?
That's a good question. So I think it's and similar at the same time. Um, Mostly it's like different processes. Um, but I think having worked with all these studios and especially now Netflix, it I think it's more about the project itself because every project is pretty unique and it kind of presents its own set of challenges. Um, but yeah, I think it's just seeing like the different processes. Like I think Blue Sky was a little bit heavier on the CG side of things and like making things look very, very good. Pixar, as you all know, like is heavily caters like the story aspect. You know, they make sure that the story is working, and it was cool to see that process. DreamWorks, um, while I didn't get a chance times, but most of this was done as a freelancer in San Francisco. Um, there was a nice kind of like, especially for this project, it was very fun to kind of work on Trolls World Tour and like um, it kind of felt like a playground, which was nice because it's trolls and you're like, they're just trolls. It's not, we're not trying to like make an Oscar nominated film with this. Like it's just, let's have fun with it. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Definitely. And I love your work so much, the way that you kind of translate your characters into shapes and the way that you use value. I think it reads really, really well. And yeah, that really helped
oh,
kind of differentiate the kind of way that each studio works. So thank you for answering that.
oh yeah, thank you. And so like in that once in a while get some illustration opportunities, which is a whole different set of skills for me at least. But they come along every once in a while, which is very nice. And this was for an illustration gig for Airbnb. I think it was an internal project, but it was just kind of like, you know, how to illustrate the importance of like word of mouth, you know, like people finding out about Airbnb at like, you know, little get-togethers or parties and stuff. And this was kind of fun because I was like, I think it's nice to kind of pay attention to the environment and like make it feel more about that because I think that's what Airbnb is. But I was like, I want to have fun with the characters. Like, I don't want to. I mean, humans are cool and all, but I think it was just a fun opportunity to like do something other than humans. I don't know if they used it or not. They loved it when I spoke to them, but I think it was like an internal project, which was a lot of fun. The next,
I
oh
have
yeah,
another question.
yeah.
Just like in general, like looking at your website before this event, I noticed that like all your work and like the drawings that you've done from life are just, I think, like so stylized and have so much character and like gesture in them. So I'm just curious to know how you approach that practice and like if you have any advice for us students who go out and cafe sketch and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a good question. People, the style question is always a tricky one for me because people always ask like about my style, and I'm like, do I have a style? I guess I do have a style. It's like my hand. You know, ultimately, it's like the hand that's like my style. But yeah, I just try to like have fun and give my work life, whether it's like a sketch of a building or like a sketch of a bicycle. Um, I think maybe it goes back to like the traditional animation roots of like making the line feel alive by making it sketchy or like tweaking something. Um, yeah, it's always just kind of my way to have fun with it and like not let it be so static, I guess.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And then this was a little illustration gig for a magazine called The Battery Candy in San Francisco. and it was fun because it was like an article on like San Francisco's historic Tenderloin neighborhood. It's a sketchy thing from the get-go, but it's also been this very kind of historical neighborhood on like you know, the daughter, I can't remember the names, but I think it was the daughters of these very like impactful founders for like gay rights and equal rights were headquartered in the Tenderloin. You know, the famous O'Farrell Theater, all these kind of like spots. And then like the one on the far right was, you know, Saigon Sandwich. I think it's called Saigon Sandwich. That I frequented when I was a kid. My parents would take us into the Tenderloin to get these like little Vietnamese banh mi's, which was amazing. So it was a real honor to like work on this one. And then, you know, I also kind of have fun with like personal piece for a show about REM sleep. And it's just gouache, and I'm a big fan of Ed Hopper and like simplified design, like just enough to give, you know, shapes I'm a big fan of shapes and like, you know, communicating as simply as possible, like you know, like design being that process of elimination. And these were characters that represented like the levels, the stages of REM sleep, which I thought was a really cool idea. I also kind of like work on personal stories. The next slide, yeah. You know, hopefully I'll get to this someday. But it's just, you know, like much of you all, like I'm sure you guys are working on like personal stories all the time, and just kind of experimenting and finding, you know, graphic ways that, you know, so much of the animation work, while I love it, it can get pretty, especially like designing for CG animation, it can get pretty redundant after a while. So illustration for me is kind of like, you know, more about the design and like the graphic qualities and, you know, the communication of like that illustration. And then the last slide is, yeah, just doing it for myself too. Like one of my favorite pastimes is to just ride around town on my bike and like find spots to sketch, whether it's a bike or, you know, an old boatyard, or some of these are like just sketches, and others I'll have my iPad with me and start doing color if I'm like feeling confident. But yeah, that is pretty much it.
Q&A. Let's see where to start. I got one question. What does your relationship look like with the director and with the story team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like that relationship is more, it's like a conversation in a way. The director has his vision, and the character designer, you know, is trying to like put a picture to that vision. And it's not necessarily like, I don't get hung up with like trying to come up with this like final design right away. It's more of like, here's what I'm thinking, here are some options. Like, you know, when I go into rounds with the director, I go in with the mindset of that being a conversation. It takes off the pressure of like coming up with a final design and the pressure of like a pretty picture, you know, and it's more of like, here's a rough idea. I'm presenting ideas more than anything. And then it's nice when directors can understand that. Yeah, it's kind of a conversation. I think with the story guys, it's a little bit of that, but nowadays, like on Zoom, it's hardly there. But in the studio, the story relationship was great because it was story artists and viz dev character designers were on the projects like pretty much early and we're parallel. I mean, first it's the story guys, and then it's us like shortly after. So it's nice camaraderie there to like know that we're at the front of whatever project we're working on.
You answered that perfectly. We have a question in the chat that's asking, when did you get your first internship?
Oh man. So never, I think I technically have never had an internship because after I graduated, I went straight to Blue Sky. But during college, I worked full time at that video game company. So I think, I mean, it was a job, but I feel like that was felt like an internship because I was going to school for traditional animation, and at the video game company, um, they I was kind of learning Photoshop and illustration and like concept design for video games, like on the side, which was kind of felt like an internship. So um, yeah, other than that, technically, I've never had an internship. But I think they're good. If you can get them, definitely get them.
What is your process when approaching character design / illustration?
Oh yeah. So as I said in the presentation, I feel like they're the same, but they're also very different. I think character design, the process there is, as a character designer, I feel like my role is to support the story first and foremost, and then to like make that character um, obviously appealing and all of that, but also I think the more important thing is like to make it believable. I feel like illustration is the same way. It's just a different. I always do. I always make bad analogies, so apologies if this is a bad one. But I feel like illustration is a different plate. Like it's the same. It's a similar kind of food, but served on a different plate. Where in illustration you can communicate um, a bigger idea or like illustrate. It becomes more about clarity. While the clarity is there in the character design aspect as well, I feel like illustration is a little bit more of like clearly communicating um, either a moment or an object or a very complex idea.
Thank you. And then Zhuang is asking, who or what are your biggest inspirations, not only artists, but also in life?
Oh man, artists. Like I said, I love Ed Hopper. Earl Thorlander is not so such a well-known illustrator, but he did a lot of like California backroad illustrations that I absolutely love. Um, God, I'm blanking. There's so many. There's so many. Um, I will point out, like, I try to look at artists outside of the animation illustration world as well. Like, I love graphic designers and photographers and, um, that kind of stuff. But I guess in life, I grew up with a pretty strong kind of family environment. My parents are kind of trailblazers in their own families. They were the first ones to kind of migrate here, and um, yeah, I look up to my parents a lot in a lot of ways. Just how they carry themselves and like how they are with each other, and like far as like work ethic and, you know, just kind of being true to myself and that kind of thing, it's always been there. So definitely my parents.
Another question for you. Would you say your culture has impacted your artwork?
Yeah, definitely. It, I feel like more and more, especially nowadays, it's important for me personally to kind of like represent it even more. Um, you know, growing up here and having like Mexican roots is was a challenge, you know, because it's like two worlds. So it's, you know, here I was seen as like the brown kid in class, and in Mexico I was seen as like the American kid, you know. So that kind of like contrast was um, tough, but at the same time, like a beautiful thing, because like with time you kind of understand and you realize like you learn how to kind of code switch, and you learn um, eventually some another like uh, great advice that my parents gave us um, was that we had the best of both worlds, you know. So I think that background um, is important for me to like really not only advocate for it, but like speak on, you know, speak my truth more than anything. And hopefully, if that resonates with people, you know, because I don't want to like, I can't speak for the like Latino experience because I'm, you know, everyone has a different kind of experience. But if there's people that resonate with kind of like my upbringing, then it's, you know, it's definitely very rewarding. So
Thank you. Someone is asking, after you got done with schooling, was there any certain art techniques that still intimidated you or you had a hard time overcoming?
color, color is so hard. You know, I think color was a tricky thing for me. I feel a little bit more confident approaching it nowadays, but one of the key pieces of advice that I received from like those amazing blue sky artists was specifically Vincent Wen. He was like, he said, don't be afraid of color. Just approach it with value. Like if you can get your values down and like get your tones down, you can literally eyedrop any color in there and it'll work. And I tried it and it did work. And he just kind of supported and like gave me the confidence to kind of approach color. Um, yeah, I think color was one of the biggest ones that I was afraid of for a long time.
I do not understand color at all. It's like a totally foreign language. I don't think I ever will, but you know.
You can become a character designer. You don't have to do color.
There you go. Yeah, the art is so wide and expansive, which is there's a
Yeah.
beauty in that. Another question from our Q&A. Do you keep a a routine / daily schedule to keep you motivated or on task for your day?
Yeah, definitely. Working as a freelancer, I learned the importance of structure and, you know, really kind of creating a schedule for myself. Um, yeah, that's definitely key, and sticking to it, but also sticking to those breaks and like that downtime, because it's all a balance. I mean, at the end of the day, you only have so many hours in a day. Um, my kind of typical day now is, you know, I wake up early, make some coffee, and like kind of do my little to-do list, see if I have any meetings, and then just have like my work time. But I usually split up the day by, you know, making a nice lunch, going on like a nice long bike ride or like a hike, um, because I think, you know, we sit so much, it's kind of like, yeah, I need to like move around, but also like um, that downtime. So
Wonderful. And then I know you're currently teaching a character design class, and you're also a part of a wonderful book called Art of Change. So I'd love to hear more about that.
yeah, I'm teaching a character design class at the Animation Collaborative, which is a small brick and mortar out in Emeryville, right across the street from Pixar. They obviously have had to adapt doing online classes during all of this. But it's cool. It's fun to teach character design because for me, it's very rewarding and inspiring to work with students who have all kinds of ideas, but it's also rewarding to kind of communicate your process. You know, like we all kind of step away from class and like sit in our workspaces and kind of just do our thing. And there's a million things happening in your head when you're sitting down and like drawing and designing something. So I think the challenge and the reward was, you know, how do I communicate my process to these students? And it's, yeah, it's a good time. I approach teaching as like not teaching, as more of like just sharing my experiences and tools, and really trying to like encourage people to you know, keep that bar like above you and like just to keep growing and learning and trying new things. So
Awesome. Another question is, how do you avoid being repetitive in your designs?
that same exact thing is just trying new things. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. Um, it's nice because like every assignment is different. So I always try to approach, you know, every design differently. But I guess it's the same in a sense that, you know, it's my hand and it's like my brain and my process and me. Um, but I think that's where I kind of like make time to like go out and sketch and like look at other things and do my own kind of illustrations to kind of change it up, because I definitely do get burned out by, you know, working on animation, you know, for a while, even though I love it and it's a lot of fun. Students to look at just like the art of books or like animation work, you know, and it's like it's important to look at photography and, you know, even like cooking and chefs and like just, you know, design, like graphic designers, and see how they problem solve things, because you just learn new techniques and hopefully that'll like change things up.
Definitely. And then someone in the chat, Samantha Blum, is saying, what do you think is the most efficient way to practice character design in order to get better at it? I also go to Academy of Art, and it's so inspiring to hear your story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think you just have to, I mean, you guys hear this all the time, like draw more, draw every day, do the figure drawing. But I think that I learned from uh, some of the guys at Tonko House is to just kind of sit and like and focus on the scene, the thing. Like if you're sketching from life and uh, you know, we can all sit there and sketch each other or sketch people in a cafe or in the park. Um, but if you sit and like see and just kind of like observe for a little bit before you start sketching, I think whatever, for me, whatever kind of becomes clear becomes kind of like the driving force in that sketch and that design. And I think that's a great practice for character design itself, because, like I said earlier, like I'm a big fan of like simplification and like clarity. And I think the clearer your character designs are, the clearer they, I mean, you're already a character designer if you're doing those things. So yeah, I think sitting and observing and kind of, simplifying it before you start sketching it in your head is great practice.
Okay, another question. What's something that you've learned while working in like the animation industry that you didn't learn while in school?
Oh man, so much. That one, let me see where this is at, because I know there's a few things there. I'll go off the top of my head. I learned so much about working at studios and in animation that they do not teach you in school. A lot of it is like the logistics and like the business side of it. A, a really good piece of advice that I got when I first got to Blue Sky from a really great artist who was on his way out. He was heading to Pixar. Was to know your worth, which kind of really resonated with me. And I think it's important because, a lot of times in school, at least in my experience, it was like, these are the designs, this is the homework, this is like, do what the director says or do what the studio says. And while that is a big part of like the gig and like our job, knowing my worth helped me have that confidence to present like my ideas on top of that. And again, like to touch on like the logistics of it, I wish there was classes about, contracts and like, numbers and that kind of thing, because as good as it is, and as lucky as I feel to have this job, like I feel like a lot of the big studios, they're businesses obviously, and they hire people to come in and like do the work and all of that. But I think if you know more about that kind of thing, it helps, to like look out for yourself when you're getting gigs and you're negotiating contracts and all that stuff. So, but that'll come with, I wish there was stuff like that in school, but it'll come with experience of like, meeting people at studios and like becoming friends and talking, from the people who want to help you out. So
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
yeah.
We have a question from Selena Garduno. For your illustrations, what inspires your color palette and texture usage?
So color palette, gosh, I guess it depends on what it is, but in my own personal work, I love I'm the artist who still has a color wheel by his desk, and am always looking at like, complements and tertiaries and all of that kind of thing. But I think, I mean, not to like simplify it, but I just try to have fun and like try to do color combinations that are fun and not really expected. And I'll be blatantly honest with you guys. Like whenever I post something onto Instagram and I apply one of their filters, I'm like, damn it, how did I not think of those color combinations? but even that like helps because it's, you know, one of those things that's like, oh, that's cool. I never thought, you know, that would go with that. You know, I think a big influence for me in color was Mary Blair. Like, if you guys get a chance to, when the world opens back up and you guys get a chance to go to the Disney Family Museum or see her work in person, I highly recommend it because some of her gouache paintings for like Peter Pan, you know, she would paint these green skies, and I'm like, a green sky, such emotion when you see it in person that um, that's like, yeah, I mean, the sky doesn't have to be blue or, you know, red or pink. It could be yellow or green or, you know. Um, so yeah, I think just having fun and like having those kind of like color inspirations in the back of my head is always nice. And I forgot the second part of that question.
Regarding textures, so what?
Oh, textures.
Yes.
Um, it's similar to lines. I just try to keep, you know, the big fill areas alive. People always ask like my brushes, and it's like I don't. It's I use Photoshop 4. Don't try not to laugh. um, and I just use the calligraphy brushes and just crank the textures up. Um, it's kind of like a way for the digital space. It was too cold and too harsh for me, so I was trying to find ways to like bring a little bit of that tactile qualities of like, you know, gouache illustrations and textures and paint into the CG world. So yeah.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful and applicable. Shout out to Melinda for having a piece featured at the Walt Disney Family Museum. Just wanted to.
Oh yeah, which one? What
Yeah.
show were you in?
It's actually the virtual. It's a Small World show.
Oh, cool.
Up, so they have like a virtual kind of room where you could go through and see everyone's pieces.
Oh, that's cool.
Mhm.
Thank you, Madison.
Of course, it's amazing. Okay, anyways, another question. What are your hobbies aside from art?
Oh yeah. I mean, everything. Everything from like eating to like bicycling to being out in nature. I I'm pretty simple. I don't need too many crazy things. Like I love riding my bike, walking around, just moving to kind of balance out all the sitting that we do at our desks. I can appreciate food. I would love to do like a little food zine at some point. Um, Movie watching is another hobby. It's, you know, yeah, I love it. I just love kind of jumping into the world and losing myself. So,
That's wonderful. Someone is saying, Willie, first off, I want to thank you for coming out tonight and sharing your journey with us. As someone who is learning and experimenting with both story and character design, do you have any resources and tips that you would highly recommend?
hmm, what do can they elaborate on the story and the character?
Ooh, it says anonymous attendee, so I'm not too sure who it is.
Can you go through it again one more time, please?
Of course. So it says, as someone who is learning and experimenting with both story and character design, do you have any resources? So I'm assuming like books and tips that you would highly recommend.
Yeah. Yes, reveal yourself anonymous. I don't know any books off the top of my head. Um, but I think approaching story and character design is great because they're, you know, two different completely different skill sets, but you know, they apply for the same kind of thing that we're doing. Story, I can't speak on too much because the kind of story that I deal with is like the supportive role of a character design, like what the character is wearing, like what their expressions and poses are. But as far as like a story artist, like it's hats off to those guys and gals, because a story artist is amazing. I mean, you pretty much have to be a director to be a storyboard artist. Like you think of so many things to kind of like visualize the story, and but then you're also thinking about shots and lenses and cameras and like, you know, all of that stuff. And then the character aspect, as I've mentioned before, like, you know, you're supporting that story through the designs, but the fact that Anonymous is approaching both, that's a good thing, because you get to learn the skill sets in each kind of practice, and it all kind of informs each other at the end of the day. So not only story and like character design, but I would go as far as like, you know, encouraging you all to like practice, you know, the color, or like, you know, practice stuff out of your comfort zone, because, you know, it all, again, like it all kind of, it becomes like you can use it as like in your tool set to like approach anything you choose to do pretty much.
Thank you so much for answering that. Let's see. How do you separate your feelings and emotions from your art? Not getting too attached.
Oh, to the work itself?
Yeah, or however you want to, you know, interpret that.
Yeah, I remember. Oh, well, initially I was like, oh man, this is tricky, because for me, art is all about emotions and feelings. But I think attaching myself to the art, it's kind of similar to what I said earlier about like, um, I fully attach to it when I'm doing it and having fun with it. Um, and then I was joking earlier with a friend, it's like a kid that goes off to college, like you have to let it go. You have to like move on and like, you know, be content with like you know, the time and love that you put into it, but then it just becomes something else, especially because we're in such a collaborative environment. Like that's part of the magic, is like you do your piece of it, and then you see it kind of evolve and grow and change, you know, when it gets into rigging and modeling and like animation. Um so yeah, I guess it's both. Like I attach myself pretty hard, and then um learn to like let go, which I think is important. It's an important value to have, because, you know, understand that, but it's the more did it, the more I understood it, um, the less it hurt, I guess.
I think that's what I really love about your work too, because once you see it, you feel so like warm and cozy inside. You can really tell that you spent time on it and you really put your heart and soul into it, and it's very evident. And by you letting it go, look how many people are here tonight just in admiration of you. You're inspiring so many people. So thank you for sharing your story and
Oh,
your artwork.
thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Oh, of course. Let's see. So Julian Sanchez is asking, has working in different studios affected your art style or your approach to character design?
Yeah, definitely. The short answer is yes. I think the longer answer is, um, you know, working on different projects definitely um, helps kind of whatever the style of the project is, I have to kind of adapt. And it's a nice thing because again, it's like trying different things. I think more and more nowadays, it's nice, the presentation you guys saw, like that's like years of work. And I think now it's nice to like get those gigs that are like calling to like, asking for my sensibilities, which is kind of stressful, but at the same time, it's like, oh, okay, what are my sensibilities? What do I do? Um, but yeah, it's part of like what you said. I just kind of give my all to it and like have fun with it.
It's awesome. Thank you. Are today.
Can you elaborate on that one?
It could be, I guess.
Oh no, okay, I got it.
Okay. Sure.
So was this the soft skills question?
Yeah, it could be like soft skills, like soft skills and
Yeah.
and then maybe like practices as well. I think you kind of elaborated on it already, but yeah, mostly soft skills.
Yeah. So I'll tell you guys a little like inspiring moment I had towards the end of like my Google experience. I saw a commencement speech by Neil Gaiman. Maybe you guys have seen it, but he gave this commencement speech. Oh, some people have seen it. Okay, cool. He gave these three kind of components to having a successful kind of career, and not necessarily, I'm butchering it, but not necessarily having like all three, like 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And they were, well, I think one was being good at what you did, 2 was being on time, and 3, just being nice to work with. And the joke, I mean, it was inspiring, but he was kind of joking that like, if you're really good at what you do and you're on time, it's okay if you're not the best person to work with. Or if you're really nice to work with and you're good at what you do, the schedule can like fluctuate, to accommodate. But when I heard that, I was like blown away by it. And I guess, yeah, those are practices that I try to um, incorporate to this day, like, just being a nice guy and giving my all to the work. And the being on time, I'm still working on, but like he said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
That's very valuable. Thank you for sharing that with us. We actually have a professor who always says that do good work, be kind, be on time. So it's very inspiring to hear.
Ask him if he saw that in Neil Gaiman's commencement speech.
Definitely will. Another anonymous individual is asking, what do you do when you are at a creative stump or art block?
That's a good one. I've learned over time to just accept it. It's part of that downtime during the day, but if I ever am in like an art block or, a writer's block or whatever, I'm there for a reason, and I just try to like turn it off and accept it and do something different. Sometimes it lasts a day, sometimes it lasts a week. Usually that's when I'll like, travel or go somewhere or like, take some time. But it's one of those things that you just kind of have to listen to it when it hits you and like welcome it in. It's not a bad thing. We're so used to like outputting so much. I think it's important to like have that downtime to like input and like replenish.
That is super, just I think encouraging, because I think we've all been there many times.
Yeah.
So to hear someone like as amazing as you to go through those same struggles is really helpful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can't express how valuable that is to get there. I mean, ideally, you want to like develop practices that prevent you from like burning out, but again, we're all human, and um, like a bad analogy, like any athlete has to rest, or else their like bodies will break. So
Exactly. Art is our sport. At least
yeah,
that's
exactly.
my excuse for not doing sports. Let's see. Another anonymous attendee asks, "What was an unlikely source of inspiration for your art?"
Hmm, that's a good question. I'm gonna go back to like my experience on this one, because you know, um, when I started working professionally in art and like started doing little interviews here and there, people ask me like where I got inspiration, or like if I had anyone in my family that were artists. And I would always say no, but I started realizing that like, you know, that doesn't mean that they're not creatively problem solving. Um, and, my mom is like, her hobby is like to cook, and she does all these amazing kinds of meals and stuff. And like just seeing her in the kitchen and like come up and like experiment and, try new things was like very inspiring to me. Um, while it's something completely different, seeing that and like applying that to what I do, um, I started answering that question differently. And I was like, oh yeah, you know, there isn't artist by trade, but there's definitely like creative problem solving happening in my family. So I think that was probably like, an unexpected source of inspiration for me.
I think that's so special and very eye-opening. It's definitely a new perspective that, our own lives, our own parents could inspire us, and we don't even know it until, we grow up and we realize that.
And we moved out and we're feeding ourselves.
We have another question from Janet, and she's asking, do you have any favorite tools for drawing that you love?
Oh man, yeah. Uh, I keep it simple. I haven't used them in a while, but I love Tombow markers, and just like color pen. I haven't touched gouache in a while, but I love gouache. Um, and I guess on the digital front, I have an iPad and a Cintiq. Procreate is awesome because it's quite not there yet, but it's feeling more and more tactile and more. Um, the brushes are, I think, superior than Photoshop even. Um, so yeah, a little bit of like the things I like to use digitally and traditionally.
Cool, thank you. Another question. Do you have any advice on staying motivated after facing rejection? Like, for example, college applications or job applications, concept pitches, internship applications, all that.
Yeah, I mean, you can spin it, and like even just the question itself, like you don't have to see it as rejection. It's just not the right time. I feel like um, we're all kind of headed in the same direction, like going to the same place. It's just, we're all on different bus routes, or like walking or riding our bikes. Like it it'll happen eventually, and like just some of us takes a little bit longer. Some of us, are on an express bus, fortunately. Um, yeah, but I think not seeing it as a rejection and seeing it as an opportunity to like grow, or you know I guess, waiting for the right time. Because, everything, I'm a firm believer in like everything happening for a reason, and just time will tell you what those reasons are. So
Let's see here. Someone is asking, what's something you learned working with engineers for your interactive work like the Google Doodles and the VR films?
oh yeah. Um it's similar to animation. Like engineers were super helpful in like giving us kind of like breaking down how the homepage worked, um, its limitations. And I think those kinds of uh, boundaries are the silver lining, because then like for example, the Google Doodle, like it's pretty much we pretty much had to say Google in every illustration because that's the sandbox, and like you can play within that, So um, having worked with the engineers there and like in VR, you get to know your boundaries, I guess, and like get to play within them. So um, I didn't pick up any like actual skill sets from like working with engineers because I think they're magicians, but um, yeah, it was definitely uh, really nice to work with them and get that experience from them.
That's so awesome. Speaking like on that topic, what are some things that you look forward to in the future of animation?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think we're getting there, but I think I think more, and I think we are getting there, but I mean that on like all levels, directors, CEOs of animation companies. I think it's a valuable thing, and you know, hopefully that will open up like a more uh, honest and genuine kind of like storytelling with the animation projects. Um, for so long, animation has been this. Uh, what does Brad Bird say about it? Like, it's this like genre, but it's not really a genre. It's a filmmaking tool. Like beautiful films like Ernest and Celestine, or the the Miyazaki stuff that's a lot more mature than a lot of like the American stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm excited and hopeful that animation grows out of this like box of like everything is for kids. While that stuff is fun, you know, it'd be amazing to see like an animated film being nominated for like Best Picture one year, because I truly do believe like animated films are, if not better, like they're definitely on par with like live action films. And I don't see it as like a thing for kids.
Definitely. Let's see here. Do you have any words of wisdom to students who are new in animation, who are currently in animation or have graduated? I know you've already inspired us a lot, but any other thoughts?
Yeah, it's just to iterate on that bus journey. It's like just stay on the bus and like keep going. Like it'll happen. If you're having a hard time with it, or you can't seem to kind of get to where you're going, like uh, just stay on the bus and like it'll kind of resolve itself and like work itself out. Um, if you get the chance to and you're able to like, you know, kind of pivot that energy and like work on your own personal projects, like do it. A good friend of mine like gave me great advice on like, you know, um, he didn't go to like traditional schooling or any of that. He was like self-taught, and his parents were like artists who encouraged and supported him his whole life. Um, and he's like very successful designer, illustrator, animator. And the advice that he gave me was, you know, to do the work that you want to do, like put the work in your portfolio that you want to get hired for, um, which was pretty like, I never thought of it that way. Like, you know, we put our websites together and our portfolios together for like studios. While, you know, that works if you want to get into Disney or Pixar, like, you know, you can kind of get an idea of what they're looking for. Recruiters will tell you what they're looking for, but, you know, if you're able to, on top of that, like, definitely include the work that you want to be doing in your work, because um, refreshing, but it'll also showcase, you know, your strengths, and like that's kind of like the ideal thing, right? Is like to get hired for what you love to do. So um, yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Um, Another question: what do you love most about your career and work as a character designer slash illustrator?
Oh man, all of it, everything I've been saying, but um, I still pinch myself that like I get paid to draw. um, it's such a humbling, rewarding profession to be in. Um, and yeah, I just, like I said, I pinch myself and I don't take it for granted, and I just try to enjoy every.
That's really terrific. I think we're reaching the end of our um, event, but I think if you're okay with it, we have a couple more questions.
Yeah, I'm cool.
Thank you. So Soren Kim is asking, how have your motivations as an artist changed since you were young?
That's a good question. Um, they've definitely like evolved. Um, you know, from when I was young, it was all about those cartoons and like, you know, the stuff Pixar was doing in high school and all of that, but it was all kind of like animation heavy. And I think as I've grown older and like evolved, um, my inspirations have kind of evolved to like painters or studio artists or photographers, or like, you know, the kind of stuff I mentioned earlier. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of how it's evolved. But I've also kind of evolved in like receiving it, you know, like a lot of times we see something and it's like, oh, that's cool. But I try to like sit with it a little bit longer when it inspires me, or like why it inspires me. Just try to listen to those motivations a little bit more.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. I think we can do one more question, just so Zoom doesn't kick us out at 9. If it does or does not do that, we do not know.
Oh, that explains the intermission.
Yeah. So let's see. This question asks a bit more about your personal projects, like you were talking about at the Academy of the Arts. Like, were you mostly working on personal projects, or was your time dedicated to school assignments, or did you kind of, bridge that? Like, what was your experience, working on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Yeah, the Academy of Art, like all the assignments were, I guess the opportunities to like work on personal stuff there was, like the animation tests and like the short film that I did. Um, that was a cool opportunity to kind of incorporate personal work in there. But honestly, like it was so busy. It was such a busy time for me because school was busy and I was taking animation classes and like taking illustration classes. But on top of it, I was working at that video game company at the same time. So um, I think it was more about everything at school and everything at work, and scratching like all the itches. Because, at the video game company, like I was able to design concepts for monsters and witches and like that kind of thing. And at school, I was doing like pencil tests on like a little kid in a playground that was close to home, or um, you know yeah. So it was, I feel like I was super busy, but there was opportunities to kind of bring my own kind of work, my own kind of life into it. um, I think if I went back to school, I would definitely incorporate a little bit more of that personal voice into the work.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah, do it while you can, you guys.
Always
If you're still in school.
Yeah.
I think if we could just answer another question I personally think we could all benefit from. Do you think variety in character design specifically for portfolios while, applying for studio jobs and things like that, do you think it's important to diversify our styles, or do you think it's also important to, visually vocalize our own personal kind of styles as well?
That's a great question. It's similar to like the advice my friend gave me, is like put your strengths in your portfolios. I think people, the people, like if you can get it past the recruiters and like into the director's hands or like artists' hands, uh, those people will see like your the quality in your work if you're like incorporating something that you love, something that you're passionate about, whether it's like a subject matter or designs. Um, and I feel like nowadays there's so many opportunities with like streaming and all that stuff that, and part of like that animation, like evolving, like studios are like hungry for unique voices. So um, it's a tricky balance because like it's important to have that other stuff in there too, like the studio, like something that would um, look like, oh yeah, that's like DreamWorks-esque or Pixar-esque or like safe, but whether that's okay as long as like if you're passionate about it, like that's the thing that's going to make your portfolio unique, is like um, put that work that you love the most, that the stuff that you love to do, because that'll really resonate with artists looking at your work.
Well, thank you so much for answering that. And thank you so much again for your willingness to come and speak for us. I admire your work so much, and I can't wait to see all the things that you continue to create, both in your personal time and throughout studios. I'm also very looking forward to a children's book from you, so keep doing that. But yeah, we're just very thankful to you, and it's been such a treat having you here.
Oh man, thank you so much. When you reached out and asked me to do this, I was like, of course, I would love to do this. It's been a while since I've like talked to, you know, students or school or club. But yeah, I'm super honored to have shared, my experience and answer your guys' questions, and hopefully, um, it's inspiring to you guys and you guys can take something from it. So thanks for having me.
Yes, so many takeaways, and yeah, just echoing what Melinda said, I am just so inspired, and yeah, just thank you so much for your time and just giving back in this amazing way. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. I wish we could do this in person.
Me too. But another time, another school year, you know.
Yeah. I am always happy to do it. When the world opens back up, I'm definitely down to do it again.
That would be amazing.
Are
Thank
you guys still in school or
online though? Yeah, it's all on Zoom as well.
how many more years do you guys have?
One semester for Madison and I.
Oh, okay. Congrats. The finish line is close.
Thank you.
Very close. Thank you. And then it just varies for everybody in the chat. We've got some alumni in the chat as well, which is really cool. Yeah,
that's awesome.
But with that, thank you again so much, and thank you to all of our attendees as well. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Have a good night,
Bye,
everyone.
guys. Thanks for having me. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.